Yanetrita Shetasen Nukheka Nubraku Nupara Nukheka Nukheka Discover Natarian philosophy through music, through video lectures, and through books by Sabai Dr. Muata Ashby. Peace be with you.
Can't hear? The image at the bottom to the left is the goddess Heru and the god Heru in their full animal forms, as a cow goddess and as a hawk god. And here Heru, the same Heru, is in a composite form with a male body and a hawk head. Amun in a full anthropomorphic form. This is anthropomorphic, this is zoomorphic. This is composite.
Thanks for repeating.
Okay, Amun has blue skin. I showed in the African origins the concept of the blue skin, the blue-black skin, relates to higher consciousness. Amun means the hidden consciousness. This you find the same kind of iconography in the pre-Hindu concept of Vishnu in India. They're directly related. And here we have Aset in another composite form, the goddess Isis. Aset has two forms. She has a form as a kite and as a form of a physical woman. And here, this is a composite form with her wings. She actually has a hawk form like Heru. And she is the mother of Heru. And the wife of Asar. She's the goddess of wisdom, and she revived him after Set had killed him in the Asarian myth.
Can you contextualize these for us? We can understand the emphasis of the hawk.
Emphasis of?
The hawk separate actually means something.
No, since this is just an overview, that's for more of an extensive talk, which I hope people will join us for later, in future weeks. Because if we go into all the details on every single slide. This is a depiction, which I explained in more detail in the African origins. This is a depiction of the system of temples. You remember the cities that I showed you, the map of Kemet, of the Nile? Happy? The system of the cities?
Yes.
And different gods that were worshipped in the different cities? This is the system of temples, and this is, the arrows are the interrelationships, the filial interrelationships between the temples and the gods and goddesses themselves. I mean, they're family relationships, they're all related. And they all emanate from the Supreme Being. And there is a male aspect and a female aspect. There is a balance between the male and the female principles in the spirituality. You don't just have God as being male. God is male or female, or both together. Now for a little bit of insight into the actual temple. How many of you have gone to Egypt? None of you? In this particular group? Okay. If you go to Egypt, you can go to this is known as a New Kingdom temple. This is one of the later period temples. This is like from about 1800 BC, about 2000 BC. And that's late period as far as we're concerned. This is ancient for everybody else. These inscriptions on the wall, you can see that mostly the color is gone on them. Some of the color remains. If you can use special instruments, you can still detect what color was depicted there. These are scenes of the king worshiping the gods and goddesses, and different scenes of the mythology. And this is for the outer expression of the teaching through the temple. This is for people outside the temple to see. This is an outer teaching, an exoteric teaching. Exo means outer. Esoteric means inner. The esoteric teaching is reserved for the interior portion of the temple. This is the peristyle court. Peristyle court, or hall, the way it's called, because these columns are placed in the periphery. In the periphery, on the outside edge, allowing the court to be open to the sky. The next hall is called the hypostyle hall. Hypo means many. There are many columns. So if we had a hypostyle hall, we'd have about 30 columns like this in this room. That's called a hypostyle hall. What this is trying to recreate is the original mound of creation. The teaching is that the creation occurred when God came into the primeval ocean, said his name, the water started vibrating, and then out of those waters emerged a mound, a little point where God was able to sit. And that mound is in the Holy of Holies, all the way in the back of the temple. If you walk in the temple, you see that the temple, this court is one step up, the hypostyle hall is one more step up, and the Holy of Holies is one more step up. The roof goes down and the floor goes up. The floor in the Holy of Holies is the highest point of the temple complex. And this is where the divine image is placed, the image of the divine. What we are discussing here today is, so far, has been teaching of the outer, the exoteric portion of the temple. We have an idea about what goes on there, but I haven't told you specifics about the disciplines that are to be practiced and the metaphysics that are to be enjoined in order to achieve the higher consciousness we're talking about. What we're going to do next is to go into the peristyle court. Here, we have ordinary people who come to give their worship and to give their offerings to the temple, but they're not allowed to go in. Ordinary people are not allowed to go in. They're not purified and they're not ready to understand the spiritual teaching. It will not be useful to them. It will be a waste of time for them. For them, they have to do work in purification and qualification as spiritual aspirants. We will be discussing teachings that would have gone forth in this area here, which is the first area that human beings are allowed who become aspirants. There are 3 levels of aspiration. First of all is aspiration, where you make a propitiation, say, let me be a spiritual aspirant. Otherwise, you're out here in the world, and you want to be in business, and you want to have fun, you want to party, you want to go do all your things in life. That's fine. Have your spirituality, you come make your offerings, and then go home. If you come into this level here, it means that you want to aspire. What are you aspiring to? You're aspiring to go into higher levels of the teaching. There are certain disciplines for the aspirants, certain disciplines for those who are striving, which is the next level of aspiration. Aspiration, striving, and established. 3 steps. Those who are striving here, and these go along with the different levels of the practice of religion, myth, ritual, and mysticism, the Trinity, Amun, Ra, Ptah, it goes along in that same, and as you're going to see, I have them all listed here. We are not going to be discussing the teaching of the hypostyle hall, nor are we going to discuss the teaching of the Holy of Holies. That is reserved for higher practice, and we are not led to that yet. Unlike a modern church or mosque or synagogue, the Unitarian Temple is not fully open to the public. There are sections reserved for different levels of spiritual practice and attainment. The Unitarian Temple is the house of the particular divinity being worshipped. The work of the outer areas of the temple is more devotional, while the work of the inner areas is more metaphysical. The priests and priestesses of the inner hall carry out the daily, monthly, and annual rituals that regenerate the power of life and creation through service and maintenance of the sacred shrines. Those same rituals also have the effect of linking the practitioner in a mystical way to the divinity, leading that practitioner to direct illumination, the experience of oneness with that divinity. Here we see a cross-section of the temple. The important thing for you to understand in this slide is that you have two pylons. One is here, and these two pylons symbolize the duality of life. You've heard of, I asked a question a couple of nights ago, as people have been know who Maati was, or Maati is. The dual goddess of truth. These two pylons symbolize the duality of life. If you go through the doors of the temple, it means that you are seeking oneness. You are seeking to unite the duality of life. What is the duality of life? The duality of life means self and other. It means that you believe that you are separate from the universe, separate from the divinity. And that is a dual consciousness, dual state of consciousness. If you discover oneness, that consciousness of duality dissolves, and all you see is divinity. You see God, the goddess, everywhere. And the procession of the advanced initiates, you see a row of sphinxes here, the procession, the temple is straight all the way through to the back. Of course, there are doors blocking all these entrances, and only to the highest initiates are the doors opened. This is another cross-section, or diagram of the temple, if you will. You can see a little better the peristyle court, the hypostyle hall, and the Holy of Holies. And these two rooms here are known as the rooms of fire and water, if you will, the rooms of duality. They are the rooms of the serpent power. And if you read the serpent power, I'm not going to discuss it any further here. If you read the serpent power book, you will find out what I mean by that. The three sections of the basic temple, peristyle court, hypostyle hall, Holy of Holies, represent the areas where different levels of worshippers may enter. This follows generally the nomenclature of triads of spirituality, the three levels of mind, unconscious, subconscious, conscious, the three levels of relative consciousness, waking, dream, and sleep. We sort of start discussing that a little bit. Religion encompasses three levels: myth, ritual, and mystical, and the Great Trinity. The three sections also represent the three levels of aspiration: mortals, intelligences, and creators or beings of light. Thus, the outer court is open to the lowest ranking practitioners to the temple, the middle is open to the more advanced, and the innermost is open to the most advanced. The innermost shrine is reserved for those who are ready to have union with the divine. There are three forms of actions: thoughts, words, and deeds. The outer court is the place for deeds, work to propitiate the divinity. Lower, i.e. lower worship, mean physical rituals, offerings to the divine, and prayers to the divine, chanting, and so on and so forth. Pure self-purification. The middle hall is a section of the temple for words. This section is reserved for the wisdom teaching, and this is where the classes will be held and spiritual wisdom is imparted. The inner hall court is the section of the temple for advanced rituals and metaphysics, meditations and mystical exercises that sustain creation and unite one to the divine. These are things that no aspirant has been given up to this point by me. The reason is because we have not reached the level to create this temple where these works can be done. However, I have placed the hints for the teaching for those of you or those people who receive the books, who can discover them or who can fathom them for themselves. And there are some advanced aspirants who are working with individually, but not as a temple situation. That's what I'm explaining. The temple is the house of life, a hospital, and a university where the whole town gathers for instruction, healing, and worship of the divine. The hospital would not be inside the temple itself. It would be a building attached to the temple. You got that? These were hospitals as well as universities, these schoolrooms for disciplines other than spirituality. There would be special buildings in the temple complex for those. Now going back to our picture of the temple, just to give you an idea of a ritual that you can see. Those of you who came to the program last night, you saw the ritual of the boat, right? You recall that? The ritual of the procession of the divine boat. And this is like a reenactment for you to give you an understanding of what that might have looked like. This is a picture, a color version of the same picture that you saw. And this is the temple. The priest conducting the procession of the divine boat. And the procession is part of the metaphysics of the temple that I'm not going to go into now for reasons of time and that I've already listed. You see here, the temple is created on an axis. All temples are created on an axis. It may be related to a particular spiritual teaching. It may be related to the cardinal points. And the procession proceeds from outside all the way to the inner court for those aspirants who are allowed, as I said before. In this fashion. And here you can see the boat entering the temple. Now this picture here is called Rekit. And I had it emerging here from the peristyle hall. This is where you'll find it inscribed on these pillars. And this means the common folk. That's what the symbol means. Rekit means the common folk. The common folk being ordinary people, or people who are coming to offer praises, offer adorations, devotional practice to the divine. The upraised arms of the Rekit bird that you can see here, this is called the dua posture. You may see some of the aspirants doing this. This is the dua posture, adorations. Where your upraised hands with palms facing outwards. And to give you an example of an actual temple that you can actually go to see today is the temple of Aset. These are the two pylons. They represent the two Ma'at goddesses, or the Aset and Nebuchadnezzar. And the door represents Asar. And if you go through that door, you come to this side, and this is the peristyle court, with the columns on the periphery of the court. You have a big open area to the sky. this slide here, I wanted to include it to show you that unlike how you hear the History Channel or other kinds of educational programs like that, the king and queen are actually considered as spiritual as well as secular leaders. They are considered also divinities to the extent that they are placed in a position of power to minister for the Supreme Being. That is how it is viewed. They are leaders of the secular and the non-secular aspects of the culture, which means they are leaders of the religion and leaders of the army, leaders of the bureaucracy, leaders of the government, and so on and so forth. Heka means prince or ruler, and Hekat means the ruled. And there is sexual symbolism because one is a male term and one is a female term. Just like the term for teaching, Seba is teacher and Sebat is the student. In that relationship, there is an exchange that goes on. So the metaphor is a sexual metaphor. The teacher and the student coming together to produce knowledge, to produce a knowledgeable person. The king and queen coming together to preside over their family, which is the people, for their spiritual welfare and their physical well-being. This is what allowed Canada to be great and to be able to sustain itself for thousands of years. This kind of order, this kind of high vision of life, the glory of spirituality that was the basis of the society, inculcated with Math philosophy, righteousness, order, and truth. Sacred scriptures of Shetaut, where am I getting all this stuff from? There are three kinds of scriptures: mythic scriptures, mystical scriptures, and wisdom text scriptures. And along with this, it's not added in there, but the genre of the harpist songs, which really is a part of music teaching, really should be part of the wisdom literature also. And all the books that you see here are based on these scriptures, one or the other. They're not invented by me, they're not fabricated. You may ask other scholars why it is that they have these available to them also and why they have not discovered. That's up to you to ask them if you're interested about that. This is what I have discovered through my researches and actually through the researches of others. We have reconstructed the teaching. I believe that we do not have to look for any place else other than the scripture, the original scripture, for record of the teaching. We do not have to invent it. We don't have to speculate about it. And we can confirm this because we can see the tradition being practiced by other African cultures, other African nations. We can see parts of it being practiced in Asia also, in Hinduism and Buddhism, which originated in Materian theology. This is how the teaching has been reconstructed. Okay, now that concludes the first portion of our lecture, and now we're going to take a break, and then we will get right into the main portion of the lecture, which will be the four Nectarian principles. Okay? Return. We continue now with part 2 of the program. Introduction to Nectarian Spirituality. Part 2, now we're going to get into, part 1 was an introduction. And part 2, we're going to get into more of a detailed description of Shetaut. And Shetaut can be condensed, shall we say, into 4 teachings. And these are called Ma'ud and Shetaut, great truths of Shetaut. Thanks. These 4 great principles of Shetaut philosophy are like formulas. In chemistry, when you have a formula, it is a code, if you will. If you mix certain elements in a particular way, you will get certain elements to come out of it, certain compounds to come out of it. And the 4 determinant principles are like that. First, we are to understand Paneter, Ua, Ua, Nebujer, and Neteru. The Neter, the Supreme Being, is one and alone and as Nebujer, manifesting everywhere and in all things in the form of gods and goddesses. Now these, before I go further in discussing this first teaching, these 4 principles, they condense the entire teaching of Shetaut. They encapsulate the entire teaching. If you were to know this teaching, these 4 teachings, that would give you the keys to understanding the entire philosophy of Shetaut. These 4 teachings give you the keys to understand the entire philosophy of Shetaut. Mind you, knowing the philosophy does not lead you to enlightenment. In order to have enlightenment, you must understand the philosophy and practice the disciplines. Information plus experience equals wisdom. Information plus no action cannot equal anything. It equals 0. It equals still ignorance. It equals more information, but you still have ignorance. Like the society, we have so much more technology than we ever had before, and it's a society that the culture is degrading more and more. And I'm going to show you how that all works. First thing to understand is that the philosophy holds that there is one Supreme Being. That's the first key to understanding the philosophy. And that philosophy manifests as Nebujer. Nebujer is the Kemetic term that means all-encompassing divinity. The all. One Supreme Being manifesting as everything. That's the first key to understand. If you miss this first key, the rest of it does not fall into place. This is not a spiritual tradition about many spirits and different gods and goddesses over here, and we have God over here, and then we have devil over here, and whatever God does, the devil goes and messes it up. It's like that joke. God and the devil were walking through a pasture one day, a garden. And God said, "Oh, look at this beautiful flower." And then the devil came and said, "Oh, look at this beautiful flower there that you're showing me. Let me take it and categorize it and organize it into a religion for you. To mess it up." Whatever God does, the devil comes and messes it up. The devil made me do it. Remember Flip Wilson? There's no devil in Shetaut. There's ignorance in Shetaut. You're either ignorant or you have wisdom. If you're ignorant, then you act in demoniac ways. That does not make you a demon. Clear on that? There is no devil in Shetaut. There's only the Supreme Divinity. And those who are ignorant about that. The task of religion is to make you knowledgeable and wise about that. Then to bring you in harmony with creation. If you're in harmony with creation, then there is no conflict. Conflict comes when you're out of harmony with creation. The concept that African religion is polytheistic is a falsehood, a misunderstanding, a fabrication by people who don't understand what they're studying, what they're doing. This goes for Yoruba religion, goes for Dogon spirituality, right down the line. Propitiating the lesser divinities to lead you up to the higher supreme being. That is abstract, that cannot be touched with thought. You need to have something that you can touch with thought and with your eyes, with your senses, to purify you, to make you ready to be able to experience the higher. Great truth number 2. Anmat sui sayuset sekemen. Lack of righteousness brings fetters to the personality, and these fetters cause ignorance of the divine. Unrighteousness is selfishness, it is greed, it is lust, jealousy, envy. But the greatest unrighteousness is the righteousness of ignorance. The Kemetic proverb goes, there is no darkness like the darkness of ignorance. And unrighteousness leads you to untruth. And this untruth is the first loss, the first fall in humanity. The misunderstanding about the nature of the divine. And science in the 20th century, science has already confirmed this teaching. And yet, we continue to be, the idea pushed on us that Western religion is correct and African and Eastern religion is incorrect, and Native American is incorrect. And that fact that's been proven is that they have proven that all matter is composed of the same elements. And all elements are composed of energy. What that means is that all of these objects that you see here in this room, the plastic, the tiles on the floor, this mat, my clothing, your skin, the air that we're breathing, is all composed of the same stuff. And this is what is called the noon in Natarian philosophy, the primeval ocean. How that primeval ocean takes forms, that is what constitutes creation. How that is done? By the word. Remember that we discussed that? Have you heard any philosophy like this before?
Yeah.
The word coming into the waters. Not just in Christianity, they have it in India also. Why do you think that that is? Unrighteousness leads us to kemen. It leads us to ignorance. And therefore, the converse is true. Righteousness leads us to purity and wisdom. Se Uwashu, Senafu, and Sayuset. Sayuset, here, the fetters. When you act unrighteously, you are fettering your consciousness, you are fettering your personality. The unrighteous act itself is a fetter on your personality. Why? Because it causes you to be conscious of your ego. Yourself as an individual. Yourself as a mortal being. If you act magnanimously, if you act with purity, if you act with righteousness, your burden of your personality is lifted, and you start coming into harmony with the cosmic order. And then you will be lifted from this Sayuset. The mummies that are wrapped, they all have a special bandage that is placed over the mouth. Symbolically, that is called Sayuset. When Sayuset is there, You cannot touch the mummy with the Shetaut instrument. Remember I told you the Shetaut instrument for opening the mouth? Remember we did the Shetaut list before? The list of teaching, Shetaut, all of those. It's in there. Shetaut is the great Shetaut. Shetaut also relates to the great star in the sky that illumines, the great enlightenment. So we have to lift Sayuset from the mouth to uncover the mouth so we can open the mouth. Opening the mouth. The mouth is the instrument of creation from which the word comes. If your mouth is covered, if it's fettered, you cannot speak. You cannot express your consciousness. You cannot live. To open the mouth, you must have purity of heart. You must have righteousness. And that process begins with Uashu. Uashu. Uashu or Ushet means devotion. And as we saw in the slides last night, remember the slides that I told you about the culture and civilization. We can have devotion, but what is the devotion to? Remember I showed you the slide, those of you here last night, I showed you a slide of the ancient Egyptian ritual of the boat being practiced by the modern day Muslims. What are they devoting that ritual to? Can you say that they're practicing the ancient Egyptian ritual? Yes? Yes or no? Why is that?
Practical. Because they're not devoting it to the divine.
Because they're devoting it to a Muslim saint and not to the divinity. So Uashu leads to Nafu, which is freedom, and freedom from Sayuset, freedom from the fetters of Set, which is your own egoism. Devotion leads you to freedom from your own egoism. Because if you're devoting to the divine, that opens you up, opens your heart. Because you can't be egoistic, because something is more magnanimous than you. Those who are egoistic, selfish, greedy people, they don't worship anybody but themselves. And others who are more greedy and more rich than them. Ari Shedi, Rek Ab, and Makeru. Doing Shedi leads to knowledge of oneself, one's own heart, and this is called true of speech. True of speech means established in truth. One who is established in truth is an Aku. Remember what is Aku? Anybody tell me what they remember was an Aku?
An awakened one.
An awakened one?
An
An enlightened person. Good. I tried to recall it to you from part 1 of the lecture, where that we're coming back full circle. These are terms that relate to the same teaching. So we have Paneter Ua Ua, Neverjed and Neteru. The God is 1-1, and this particular term is a special term that is found in the hieroglyphic text, the scriptures. It means 1-1. Literally 1-1. One without a second. Because, think about it, if you have a supreme being, but then you have another God there also, not necessarily a devil that's going to do, then you have to wonder, is there another super being above that one? And then you have that super being, now you have to wonder, is there another super being above that one? And you go on and on and on, ad infinitum. Philosophy is showing us that there is one supreme being manifesting as all. So from our perspective, from Shetaut perspective, The Supreme Being, Mebajer, is the same one that the Christians call God the Father. It's the same ones that the Islam, the Muslims call Allah. It's the same one that the Hindus call Krishna. Same ones that the Buddhists call Buddha. Again, ask a Christian to see if they agree with that, and I guarantee you they will not agree with that, because God the Father is the only one. Any other name is blasphemy, is whatever. Muslims will not agree with that. Jews will not agree with that. Western religion will not agree with that, because Western Orthodox religion is exclusive, not inclusive. Orthodoxy does not comprehend the concept of pantheism, or what is called monism. These are what these concepts are referred to. We have an understanding that God is supreme, manifesting as all, manifesting as me, manifesting as you. In fact, we are all netadus here. We are all gods and goddesses in the making. Some of us have consciousness of that, some of us have more, some of us has less, some of us has none. The person walking outside there, living in the park bench, they have the least. But in many ways, the rich people in Hollywood have even less. That person in the park bench is more elevated than a lot of other people. But we won't go into that. This term ua ua, you should remember that. Ua ua, one, one. And Neverger, extremely important term, meaning all-encompassing divinity. Sayu said, another important term to remember, the fetters of the mouth. Kemen, ignorance. Kemen coming from the root word ken, which means black. This is the negative aspect of blackness. Not black people, blackness as a philosophy. The positive aspect of blackness is Asara, the Lord of the perfect black. The blackness of consciousness, blackness of the primeval ocean. And of course the term Ma'at. And then in the third principle, Uwashu is the important term, the key term in that statement. Uwashu is devotion. Ancient Egyptian proverb that says the path to the divine is one, with two parts, wisdom and devotion. Devotion without wisdom is blind faith. Wisdom without devotion is dry intellectualism. Don't be fooled by people who are highly intellectual and they can quote all the scriptures, and they can say all this and they can say all that and sound very good and theatrically and jump up and down and scream hallelujah. It doesn't mean anything if they don't have the experience of the divine. They don't have the philosophy. In our tradition, the philosophers write, and it's the same in the Eastern tradition. I'm not one to boast. I'm not one to boast. I'll say it a second time. But there are very few spiritual scholars who have written one book. You should wonder about that. They can talk a good game, and they can impress you with their theatrics. Maybe Sebastian Montes not so impressive with theatrics. Maybe I should jump and do a couple of somersaults for you. And get you to jump up and shout. And you think that'll help you? It might help me, because then I can get my Cadillac and I won't have to go around the bend. Right? It won't help you. But I don't need that. That's not going to make me feel happier. What makes me feel happy is extolling the teaching. I'm happier now than you can ever imagine. And writing the books and extolling the message of the divine. That is what I'm about. What are you about? Sheti. And the fourth teaching, Sheti is the important principle. Sheti means the spiritual disciplines. Sheti or Sheti, maybe spelled. The disciplines are what we refer to as the yogic disciplines. There are 4 basic yogic disciplines that we're going to discuss in a few minutes. And these are to be practiced so that you can reach knowledge and purity of heart. Purity of heart leads to makeru, which is truth of speech, truth of the mouth, opening of the mouth, awakening of the spirit. And what are you supposed to be devoting to? The divine. What are you supposed to be studying to get the knowledge of? The wisdom philosophy. These are the keys. We're going to go into a little more detail here. These are the books of the theology, of the Shetaut theology. The other books are augmenting books with different sections of the teaching. Anonian theology. This is the philosophy of Ra. Engineer Volume 2 has the mysteries of Amun and Theban theology. The mysteries of mind and Memphite theology has the teachings related to Ptah theology. And Resurrecting Osiris has the teachings related to the Asarian tradition. Anonian theology is the source for all of these, as I said before. The Asarian tradition was the most popular national religion of Kemet. It was practiced generally throughout the entire country. But to recall that all of these existed side by side without conflict. In fact, we find a person going to the Ra temple and then going in the morning and going to the Asar temple in the evening. And let us not forget the goddess path. In African tradition, the goddess, well, especially in Kemetic tradition, the goddess has a special place, especially in the form of goddess Aset, Isis, and the goddess Net, and Heteru. These are some of the main forms, and Sekhmet. These are some of the main forms of the goddess. The song that you're listening to just now were songs devoted to goddess Net. Great truth number 1, which means all encompassing divinity. We explained that. Let us move down to here. Temperature is closely associated with the divinity Khepri. Khepri is the creator of the morning and the first aspect of Ra. There is a Anunian trinity, which we're going to get into in a little while, so I'm not going to give you much detail on that you should be understanding. But for now, understand, you see the picture of the beetle. Khepri. He is the creator aspect of the divine. He's the one who creates the day and creates the cycle of time. And the scripture says, Netera Khepri Jeseth. The Supreme Being creates himself. He is one. Nobody created him. He emerged on his own from the spiritual oceans, from the noon. Because if we had say that Khepri was created, then we have to say, who created Khepri? And who created the God who created Khepri? Who created the God who created the God who created Khepri? Who created the God who created the God who created the God who created Khepri? And we don't find an end. The philosophy gives you a definitive answer, an absolute answer. The one supreme being brought himself into existence out of that same primeval ocean, manifesting as the universe that you see today. God is not very far then, is she? With this understanding, let's realize that you're wearing God right now. Those of you who are holding your face like this, you're holding God right now. You're sitting in God's chair, walking in God's shoes, if you have shoes on, or socks, or your feet. You see the glory of this philosophy, what I'm talking about? If it's correctly understood. And the loss of this is just a sorry affair for those who miss out on it. God is the Father of beings. God is the eternal one, and infinite and endures forever. God is hidden, and no man knows God's form. No man has been able to seek out God's likeness. God is hidden to gods and to men alike. God's name remains hidden. It is a mystery to his children, men and women and the gods. God's names are innumerable, manifold, and no one knows their number. Though God can be seen in form, and observation of God can be made at God's appearance, God cannot be understood. God cannot be seen with mortal eyes. God is invisible and inscrutable to gods as well as men. Portions from the Egyptian book have come forth by day, the Pernaru, text of Nesi Kensu. Did you follow that? What this is saying is that there is a supreme hidden Shetaut Natur. And even the gods and goddesses, meaning those beings that are in the next plane elevated above us, even they cannot fathom the essence of that supreme being. Remember, the gods and goddesses, the lesser beings that we're talking about, the ones that are below the supreme being, even they don't have. And they have to do the same thing we have to do. They have to practice the Yuwashu, they have to practice the disciplines in order to enlighten themselves also. Gods and goddesses means beings that are more elevated than us, but not supreme beings. See? And the scripture makes it particularly clear that men, women, and gods are in the dark about this, the mystery about this, so they have to discover that mystery. The Neteru, gods and goddesses, proceed from the one supreme Neter. And this is a graphic depiction of this for you to understand. The one supreme being gives birth, or gives rise, to all of the other beings, the other divinities, gods and goddesses, and to human beings, and to nature, the planets, the stars, so on and so forth. This is what the philosophy says. This is what you've been hearing. This is what Ua Ua means. Great truth number 2. Lack of righteousness brings the fetters to the personality, and these fetters lead to ignorance of the divine. Inch set. When a human being acts in ways that contradict the natural order of nature within that person's personality, will develop negative qualities of mind. These are the afflictions of Set. Set is the Neteru of egoism and selfishness. The term Sayuset means fetters of Set. Fetters of Set as it developed into a disease. And the disease is Inch-set. And Inch-set may be understood as an affliction. If I tie you up and I bind you, and you tie your hands up, and if I leave you there, those of you, you've seen the horror stories of, and we've seen dogs who are tied up. You tie up a dog, leave it with a chain for weeks. The chain starts going into their skin, right? You seen that? You might develop a disease because the skin might get messed up, it might get diseased and hurt. You might get gangrene, you might have to cut off your arm. It's an affliction, it's a disease. The disease is called anger, hatred, greed, lust, jealousy, envy. These are mental diseases. Mental failings that must be cured. Aset is the goddess that holds the cure for those ills. The cure is wisdom of self. Those who are wise of self cannot be egoistic. They cannot be selfish. They cannot be anything but helpful to humanity. This divinity here is Set. And this is the divinity that many scholars, including myself, believe that the early Jews confused and developed their concept of Satan. Actually, one of the names of Set is Setek or Sutek. Sutek, Satan, it's not a far move from there. But the Jews, of course, we know that if they existed, they supposedly emerged with Moses from ancient Egypt. Obviously, they say, the Bible says that Moses was an Egyptian priest, so obviously he knew all of the wisdom, all of the teaching. And then we come out with this philosophy of a devil, of a Satan. Then Christianity takes it over. Then Flip Wilson takes it over. The devil made me do it. See, I'm laughing about it, but it's a big problem. Because if you have a devil out there who's making you do stuff and you don't have control over it, then you don't have to answer to anybody, do you? You can say, oh, I couldn't help myself. And then you're free to be unrighteous, you're free to do whatever it is, and not be controlled, because you can't do it. You can't control yourself. There's some force, and you need to have it exercised. This is a new concept in spirituality that emerges with Judaism and a few other traditions. Zoroastrianism. There's a kind of evil God and there's some kind of a good God, and they're both battling, and people are caught in the middle with a tug of war. And you have the devil on one shoulder and an angel on one shoulder whispering to you, tell you, don't do this, be good, and don't do this, be bad. Right? Let me ask you this. When you're talking on the phone, and somebody comes around your shoulder, tell them this, tell them that. Did they say this? Did they say that? Can you listen to what the person's saying and talk to the person at the same time? You tried that? If you try that long enough, what will happen? You won't get any communication done, and also you'll go crazy. So this concept of a devil and an angel on your shoulder, this is a concept that is driving people mad. That's what I'm saying. Spiritual madness. Those who are really into it. For those who have wives who do not get into it, they just leave it altogether, but they don't have religious process. They just leave the church because they see, well, there's some insanity here, I can't deal with this, let me get out. The forces of entropy. This is another major concept in Unitarian theology. There is no evil. There is creation and destruction. There is creation and entropy, really, to be more precise. Anything that you build, can you imagine how this building must have looked? Can you take a picture with the camera? The building is an older building, and some of the parts, they can be painted, they can be fixed up with cracks in the wall. Imagine how it looked when it was new. Obviously, it was built a little while ago, and it's falling apart. That happens to everything. It happens to this chair. This chair may last 500 years, but I guarantee you in 500 years, you're going to find it in dilapidated condition. Your bodies are deteriorating even as we speak. Those of you who are 5 years old, those of you who are 50 years old. Everything has entropy, and everything must be maintained. Everything must be continuously worked. And so Set is not a devil, because here we find that he is placed in the service of Ra, who is the representative of the Supreme Being in time and space. He is fighting the serpent of chaos that is trying to stop the journey of the boat. That same boat that the priests were carrying into the temple is the same boat that Ra created it's a recreation of the same boat that Ra created in the beginning of the time. To stop that boat means that you're trying to stop creation. You're trying to bring creation to a halt. That you're trying to stop order. That you're trying to stop righteousness and truth. If that were to happen, this whole world would come to an end. And as I said before, even the king must make offerings of Ma'at. The king, one of his main duties is to uphold righteousness and order and truth. Why? So that there may be continued prosperity in the land, continued prosperity and peace. And perpetuation of the culture. And here, Seti first is seen making an offering, a Ma'at, to Asar, who is off the screen here on this side. And you can go and see this inscription even today in the temple of Seti first in Atu. The offering of Ma'at is the ultimate offering that a king can make. And this is what he is expected to do. This is one of his main roles, to protect people and protect order, to